So thank you all for being here. I'm really honored and excited to be with you. For those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Joyce Marter, and I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. So I'm a psychotherapist, and I've been practicing for about 20 years in private practice. And I started a group practice called Urban Balance, which today, I can't believe it, has over 100 therapists working from 10 locations in 3 states. So it grew a tremendous amount. And I'm really excited to talk with you guys today about financial self-care and how to welcome prosperity. This is something that I'm super passionate about. I'm really passionate about it because as a therapist, finances are a big part of people's lives, right? It affects every part of their life. It affects their stress level. It affects their relationships. It affects where they live, hobbies, vacations, how they spend their time, what their opportunities are. It affects every aspect of life. Finances are also something that most couples argue about. So it's an important issue in our lives that needs to be addressed. And something that I noticed that was really interesting is that as I've counseled people, whether they were coming in for depression or anxiety, relationship issues, addiction, didn't matter. As I was counseling them, they started to make more money. And I was like, why is this happening? Across the board with my clients, they were getting raises, promotions, starting new businesses, thriving and blossoming financially. And then I realized our self-worth affects our net worth. So how we feel about ourselves, our self-esteem, can affect our bottom line. I'm especially impassioned about this for women because we women are socialized often to put other people first, to be good girls, to be of service, and sometimes that impacts us financially. And I think the keynote speaker earlier today was talking about how we still have such a margin in pay rates. So women are still being paid 80 cents on the dollar. So this workshop is to help inspire you to welcome prosperity into your life because it can really open up so many doors. So I am writing a book, and it's called Mental Wealth. So what I have come to believe is that true prosperity is when we have positive mental health, we have good self-esteem, we have love and support in our lives, we have connected relationships, and we have financial wellness. Is this selfish? Is this greedy? Is it narcissistic? I'm seeing some no's. No, it's not. Sometimes people think money is bad. And I really believe that money can be incredibly empowering and life-changing. And it depends how you get the money and what you do with the money that makes it either bad or good. And if you're receiving money in a way that's aligned with your unique talents in the world and sharing those and reaping the benefits of that, and then sharing your prosperity in a way that can help others, my goodness, you can certainly help more when you have money. It allows you to do more than you might not have ever been able to do before. So I started my business with $500 and $50,000 of student loans. I'm a person who had tremendous financial anxiety because when I was growing up, my father was laid off in the automotive recession. And from the time I was 8 years old to the time I went off to college, he was unemployed most of that time. And he had tremendous financial anxiety. He was born during the Great Depression and was very fearful when it came to money. And I absorbed that. So for me, having $50,000 of student loans made me really nervous. I remember once I was talking to my best friend, and her husband is in commercial real estate, and she said, would it make you feel better if I told you that Steve has $300 million in loans? Can you imagine? I don't think I could sleep at night. So my point is that I had this debt and went through kind of a financial roller coaster in my own personal and professional life as I was building Urban Balance. Because it's an insurance-friendly practice, the larger we got, the more money was outstanding from insurance companies, because you know they take forever to pay. And so I had cash flow problems, really bad, to the point where I thought I was going to have to file bankruptcy. It was really scary and very stressful. And I actually sold Urban Balance in 2017 when it was grossing over $5 million a year. And I want to share with you what I learned about my own relationship with money to welcome prosperity. And when I had more, I was able to give more, to offer counseling at pro bono services if people didn't have the money to pay, or sliding fee, or to allow the staff to pick a charity of their choice, and for us to donate $100 to that charity each year. So my point is, when we have mental health and abundance, we can do amazing things in our lives. And this is not a new concept. Mental wealth is not a new concept. This is Lakshmi, the goddess of abundance. She's a Hindu goddess. And in this picture, you can see she has gold coming out of her hands. So she has financial prosperity. But she's also holding the lotus flower. And the lotus flower is a symbol of spiritual enlightenment. And to me, that is when you are living your life in a way that is connected with your divine self, your soul, your unique spirit, and the gifts you have to give in the world. And when you do that, and you care about yourself, you can have abundance. And abundance can be money, but it can also be other resources. It can be love. It can be friendship. It can be support. There's so many gifts in the world that are available to you. And sometimes I think we set our own ceilings. When I first started as a therapist, I had, again, $50,000 of student loans, and the average starting salary was $18,000 a year. And I heard of one woman that got a job for $25,000. This was in 1996. And I thought, I want a job making $25,000 a year. And I got one. I was very proud of myself until I discovered it's really hard to live in Chicago making $25,000 a year. So then I decided 2 years later that I wanted to make $35,000 a year. So I got a job at an employee assistance program making $35,000 a year. Not any more than that. And then, when I started my private practice, I met with my friend Steve. And Steve was starting his private practice. And he said, hey, Joyce, how much money do you want to make? And I said, gosh, it would be amazing if I could make $60,000 a year. And he kind of frowned, and he said, 60? I said, oh, I want to make over 100. And I said, do you think that that's possible? And he said, absolutely, that's possible. And that year, I made 60, and Steve made over 100. And I thought, am I setting my own ceilings with self-limiting beliefs? Yes. So I expanded my thinking. I have some resources coming up, but I started listening. It's a little woo-woo, but I started listening to a CD called Receiving Prosperity by Louise Hay. And she does wonderful affirmations and has Hay House books, which are really positive and supportive. And this receiving prosperity thing basically teaches you how to think about your relationship with money. And I worked on that, and I decided that I was worth having money. And it sounds crazy, but at that time I had tremendous debt from my business, no cash flow, and I said, I want $2 million, universe, and I believe I'm deserving of that. And I went and talked to my CPA. He did a valuation of my business because I was in such a state I thought I was going to have to file bankruptcy. And he said, Joyce, you won't believe this. I said, what? He said, your business is worth $2 million. That exact amount. Now, is that a coincidence? Maybe. part of me thinks that's pretty neat, that it wasn't until I realized that I was worth it and said that I found that out. There's an expression, we're all beggars sitting on a golden bench. While not everybody may have a business that's suddenly worth more than they thought, we all have talents and resources and opportunities available to us that can bring us prosperity if we shift our thinking to know that we are deserving. I have become really passionate about the psychology of money. Again, I think our families of origin impact how we think about money. So people who grew up in poverty, I had one client that she grew up in poverty, and there was sometimes not enough food. She spent a lot of her life without toiletries. And as an adult, she became a hoarder because she was afraid that she wouldn't have those things. So she bought huge amounts of all of those products. And she also became morbidly obese because she was afraid that that food might not be available to her at some point. And so our past impacts our relationships with money. We want to be aware of that. So we want to think about that. I really believe in the abundance theory. So there's two different ways of looking at life. There's the abundance theory, which is the idea that there's plenty for all of us. Plenty of resources, whether it's job opportunities or money or whatever it is that we want, that it's available. The scarcity model is like musical chairs. Like there's not enough, and we have to compete and fight for resources. And I really believe in the abundance theory. And I've ascribed this to my business and to my life. So I often teach private practitioners, therapists who own their own practices, how to grow their practices. And I've had people say, why do you do that? You're creating your own competition. That's ridiculous. But what I believe is that when you share, that comes back to you in good karma. So I would help others, and guess what? They would refer to me. Maybe my practice took some insurance that theirs didn't. Or maybe they'd recommend me to somebody else, that they, a friend or something like that. So again, thinking about how to shift the thinking of abundance. The power of intention and self-fulfilling prophecy. My best friend accuses me of psychotic optimism because I so often try to look at the positive in any situation. And I guess that has been studied, and entrepreneurs typically have almost irrational positivity in terms of looking at how things are going to work out rather than the roadblocks. So you can teach yourself how to look at self-fulfilling prophecy, because I believe what we think, we become. So if you make a statement like, I'm broke, I am broke, I am poor, you are telling yourself what you are, and that becomes your reality. So you want to shift those messages that you're telling yourself, because we all do that, and open yourself up to a greater life. Expanding your thinking and your comfort zone so that you can live a greater life. So I'm a big believer in just continuing to grow and develop. And here you are at this conference, you're learning new skills and you're making new friends that could help you blossom. So sometimes that's uncomfortable, sometimes it's scary. I think about the first time that I was invited to do TV, and I've gotten to do some pretty cool TV. The first time I was on ABC, and I was on a segment about stress management. And it was kind of funny because I didn't listen to my own advice at all. I didn't get enough sleep, I over-caffeinated, I didn't have proper nutrition. I was completely stressed out, but I was the expert. And the producer asked me if I was ready to start shooting, and I said, absolutely. And the sound guy said, well, Joyce, I can hear your heartbeat pounding through the microphone, so we're gonna need to re-mic you. But my point is that sometimes we have to push ourselves out of our comfort zone in order to grow. So just continuing to take new opportunities and say yes to things, even if maybe you fail, maybe you don't do the best job, or maybe you do okay and new opportunities unfold and become available to you. So I encourage you to do that in many different ways in your life. The emotions around money. So as a therapist, my job is to tend to people's emotions. And wow, do we have a lot of emotions about money. Here are some that I've seen often and I've experienced myself. On the left, I have the darker colored emotions, which are the negative emotions that sometimes each of us feels in our relationships with money. And on the right side, I have in gold the positive emotions. And I believe we have a choice. We are each responsible for our own thoughts and feelings. And we can choose to make a shift. We can choose to coach ourselves through some of these negative emotions, to be our own compassionate advocate, to say it's okay that you're scared. It's okay that you're feeling anxious. This is just a feeling. It's a wave of energy that you're feeling in the body. It's a normal response to what you're going through. But you can do this, and you're worth it. You deserve it. So I'm asking each of you to do that. Because again, as women, if we collectively value ourselves, we can close that gap, that 80 cent on the dollar gap in pay rates. But we have to know that we're deserving, and we have to ask. I loved it. The CEO of Salesforce, which is a huge corporation, heard about the gender gap. And he was upset and asked his accountants to look and see if that was happening within his own organization, and discovered, unfortunately, that it was. And he immediately made a change to increase all the women's salaries so that they were equal to the men's. And I don't have the statistic, but it was millions of dollars that was spent on this. And wow, what an amazing thing to do. So again, we all need to be part of that solution of closing that gap and choosing how to manage our relationships about money. So I think sometimes we think that people who have money are narcissists, or they're materialistic, or they're bad people, or they're arrogant. These are negative beliefs, and often false beliefs, that we have about money. And some people, sure, have false ego and false pride, and they earn money in a way maybe that isn't the best. Yes, that does happen. But I believe that when you align with that higher self and your greatest gifts in the world, you can really welcome prosperity. And that involves detaching from ego. We all have egos. It's part of the human condition. But detaching from that and connecting with that deeper part of yourself. I do that through meditation, through yoga, and other psycho-spiritual practices. Counseling. I think we all need counseling at different points in our lives. My own therapist said to me once, she said, Joyce, what does money mean to you? When I was really stressed out about money. And I said, when I think of the word money, I think of stress. And she said, well, no wonder you make it go away. And she said, can you change that? And what would you like to believe about money? And I said, I'd like to believe that it's a resource and that it's available to me and that I'm deserving of that resource. And once I worked on that, that's when my life began to change. Understanding, again, that your self-worth determines net worth. So one time I had a speaking engagement, and it was my first out-of-state speaking engagement. And I didn't know what to charge. And I'm aware that sometimes I undervalue myself. So I called my friend Ross, who gives speaking engagements frequently, and I asked him what he charges for an out-of-state gig. And he gave me his dollar amount, which was higher than I would have been comfortable with normally. But I called the people back, and I said, this is my fee. And they said, no problem. And I called Ross back, and I said, I can't believe I'm getting paid that much for a 45-minute keynote. And he said, 45 minutes? I gave you my full day rate. So Dr. Phil said, the most you get is what you ask for. And as an employer of women and some men, I've noticed that when I make an offer, a job offer to someone, often women will say, "Thank you so much. Thank you. And yes, I will accept the job." And most employers have a range that they're able to afford to pay to you. And they start at a lower end of that range. And you have the responsibility to advocate for yourself and to ask for more, to ask for what you deserve. And so with my own student interns, I would mentor them and role play with them how to negotiate their starting salary. But they had that meeting with our clinical director. And so it was kind of funny because here I was the owner of the company and I'm teaching them how to ask for more money. But I did that because I care. And I believe as mentors, we need to help other people value themselves and develop these skills to advocate for themselves and ask for what they deserve. I have a videographer here today, so I had a friend and colleague do my makeup. She's becoming a professional makeup artist. And she told me her fee, and I said, "Belle, no, like you're worth so much more than that." And she was like, "Don't pay me more, don't pay me more." Are you giving those messages out in the universe? I paid her what I thought she was worth, which was twice what she was going to charge me. So being mindful of that and thinking, how can you be a mentor to other young women and people who you notice are not maybe valuing themselves in the way that they should? Self-sabotage is something we want to be mindful of. We all unconsciously recreate what's familiar until we choose something better. So we want to be aware of how we might be hurting ourselves. Maybe it's compulsive spending. Maybe it's when we are feeling bad, we soothe ourselves with shopping beyond our means, and then we create stress for ourselves, and we're not able to move forward financially. So again, remembering that having money isn't necessarily about ego, and that you have more opportunity to be of service when you have more to give. The flow of money. I mentioned to you that I meditate and I practice yoga, so we talk a lot about the flow of the breath. And it occurs to me that love also has a flow, and so does money. And I've noticed in my life and in my practice that some people are very miserly. I had a neighbor like this. That they were very successful financially, but spent so little that it was notable and almost odd. So very kind of fear-based. I once had a client who was a multimillionaire, but he had obsessive compulsive disorder and wouldn't even pay to valet park because he didn't want to spend the money. So overly miserly is one end of the continuum. And then we all probably know people that are maybe on the other end where they're spending way beyond their means. You know, maybe trying to keep up with the Joneses. So we want to find that healthy flow where there's money coming in and a balance of what's going out and a balance of what's being saved so that we have resources. Because when we have financial resources, we have financial peace. We have stability and security in our lives that we deserve. And it helps us sleep at night. It helps us feel better. It helps us be empowered. I got a divorce several years ago, and my older daughter, who at the time was 12, which is pretty young, she said to me, "Mom, I am proud of you that you were able to leave your marriage when you felt that you needed to, because I had the financial means to do so." So kind of an interesting statement and point, but she said some of her friends actually made the comment that they had mothers that wanted to leave a marriage and felt that they couldn't. So financial empowerment, I think, is really important. You want to balance the ebbs and flows. So in my practice, a lot of times Decembers and August were very slow, and I would panic. And January and back to school time were very busy. So after a few years of getting very stressed out every December and every August, I decided instead I would just take my vacations during that time. the clients weren't coming to me, why don't I just enjoy that time off and create time for myself to reboot and trust that the money will come back that January or that fall. So you may have different seasons of spending. You know, we all spend, many of us, a lot of money around the holidays, or if at different points in our lives, you may have kids that are in school that you're paying for. Those are expenses that kind of ebb and flow. You want to plan for those ebbs and flows and invest in yourself. And again, welcome that prosperity. You want to turn up the volume on that flow and have more coming to you that you deserve. Conscious behavior. So some people are financially unconscious. So, on the left side, you can see some of the unconscious behavior, and you want to move toward consciousness. So some people are in denial about their finances. This was me when my business had poor cash flow. I kind of stuck my head in the sand like an ostrich and didn't seek the financial help that I needed because of fear. I was afraid that somebody was going to tell me that my business model didn't work. And so I avoided it, which was foolish. And I caused myself a lot of stress and harm that could have been prevented if I had opened my eyes. So sometimes people don't even know their net worth. They don't know what their debt is. They don't know what their assets are. They don't know what their home is valued at. We want to be financially aware. That's the first step to being conscious. Blame and responsibility. Sometimes people blame, whether it's their family, their history, their industry. I work in an industry where people joke that you don't go into it for the money. You can blame other things about why you don't have the prosperity that you wish you did. But if you take responsibility for it, it can become very empowering. You can create the life that you want. You must take action. You can't take a back seat. As a therapist, I notice a big difference between people who kind of go with the current of life as if they're in a little rowboat and they're not pulling out their oars. They don't have a map of where they want to go. You need to have a map, and you need to empower yourself with your oars to determine your direction and where you want to go, and you have to know that you're deserving of more. Behavioral health issues. Obviously, as a therapist, I see that our mental health has a huge impact on our finances. And again, I think we all can benefit from counseling at different points in our lives. It doesn't mean we're crazy, doesn't mean we're in crisis. We're just taking care of ourselves. We're getting support. We're talking to someone who can help us learn more about ourselves and improve some of our thinking and behaviors. So I think all of us deal with, whether it's depression or anxiety or grief or stress at different points in our lives. And depression can affect finances in terms of motivation to work, or maybe calling in sick, or not feeling deserving. So it's important to treat these issues. You might notice this in yourself or in friends or colleagues or family members. So bipolar disorder is a serious mental health issue where sometimes people experience hypomania or mania. It's kind of an elevated mood state. And when people are in that mood state, they want things that make them feel good. So my friend had a sister who had bipolar disorder, and she took herself off her medication, and in one weekend, she bought a horse, a boat, and a car that she couldn't afford. It was over $100,000 that she charged. So big problem. So unaddressed mental health issues can often lead to financial distress. Anxiety, so fear. I mentioned the client with OCD that didn't want to spend money, just fear that it's not going to come back, a difficulty in trusting in the universe to provide. Addiction, obviously people who are suffering from addiction may spend huge amounts of money. Back in the day, I worked for a methadone maintenance clinic where clients were in and out of the penitentiary. Many of them had become involved in crime. because they were spending more than $100 a day on heroin. That's really expensive. Who can afford that? So it leads to crime and other problems. So addiction can be extremely costly. So making sure that your loved ones are getting the help that they need. How many of you saw A Star is Born with Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper? Such a beautiful movie. And it shows how addiction and depression can impact people's lives. So whether it's anxiety or drugs, it's also important to be aware of process addictions, which are things like gaming that many people do, or surfing the internet, or even our little phone games. Sometimes people can develop addictions with those things, or pornography, and help is available. Again, no shame, no stigma. We're all human beings doing the best that we can, and we need counseling or therapy to help us move forward with those. So the next few slides are kind of practical financial tips, and obviously I'm a therapist, I'm not a financial planner, but these are good kind of things just to keep in mind, that it's important to have a budget or a spending plan, to know what your income is, your expenses. I'm a big believer in auto bill pay, so that it's just taken care of and you don't get those fees. And it takes some planning so that you make sure that you have the funds in your account to pay. Being mindful of your taxes. For me, whenever I do my taxes, it's kind of a wake-up call. And that audit, in terms of preparing the information for my accountant, I often realize that my spending might be a little bit off. Like, I noticed, I remember one year, my daughters are now 14 and 17, but I remember seeing that our older daughter, who was then, maybe 9, was spending, we had a recurring fee for Movie Star Planet, some silly website that she was on, and I was telling a friend about it, and he said, my daughter spent $100 on Smurfberries on some video game. And so sometimes we're paying for things that we signed up for years ago. We don't even realize that these recurring expenses are being charged to our credit cards or accounts. Again, being financially conscious means you're reviewing those things and you're paying attention to it and you're catching any errors. So making sure that you're avoiding fees and you're being a smart spender. And the fees might even be parking fees or other consequences that you're having for not being timely in some of your behaviors. Being sure that you're being a smart spender, whether that's consignment or sales or discounts or just being efficient about how you do things. And that you're using all the benefits that are available to you. As a healthcare provider, a lot of my clients use their Health Flex spending accounts to pay for their copay sessions for their therapy. And I'm not sure everybody understands what those flex spending accounts are for, but they save you tax dollars. It's pre-taxed money that you can use for your healthcare expenses. So making sure that you're being smart about utilizing all the benefits that are available to you, and including tax write-offs. So I think also whether it's getting some advice from somebody who knows more or actually seeing an accountant, I think that can be really, really helpful. My brother-in-law used to say that debt was his friend. I think debt sometimes is necessary for us to move forward. I had a client once who was really stuck in her kind of crappy job that she hated, and she was a very gifted photographer. And I said, what would it take for you to really make it as a photographer so you didn't have to work this waitressing job that you hate so much? And she said, well, I don't have the proper equipment. And I said, well, how much would the equipment cost that you feel that you need? And she said, there's one lens, it's $1,500. And I said, do you have a credit card? And she said, yes, there's not a balance on it. I said, what's available to you? She said, $5,000. And she was afraid of charging something, afraid of the interest, afraid that she wouldn't be able to pay it back. And I said, I believe in you. I believe you are such a gifted photographer. I believe that you could get yourself that lens and pay it back. And she did. In fact, The next month, she got hired by Sony and was paid $5,000 to shoot a major event in the city. Isn't that amazing? And I think we all have those opportunities. Now that so many people have side hustles, whether it's Lyft or Uber, or they're selling something on Etsy, or they're, whatever it is, some side part-time thing, maybe it's Airbnb, but it's another way to supplement your income. So again, with debt management, making sure you're aware of the interest rates, that you're consolidating debt, that you are lowering the interest rates. I don't know if you know this, but with your credit cards, you can call them. You can ask them to lower your interest rates. You want to try to pay the lowest on the interest that you can, and you want to have a plan to get yourself out of debt. So again, being financially conscious, I remember in the 90s, I got Microsoft Money, which was my first system for organizing my finances. I put in all my information, and then it showed me a pie chart of my spending, and it was rent and food, and then my hair at the salon, and I was like, whoa, that is totally disproportionate to what I'm earning. I should not be spending that. So again, just being aware of where you're at with things and making changes so that you can move forward. Being aware of, if you own a home, many times if you get a line of credit, you can pay off high-interest credit cards with your home equity line of credit, which has a lower interest rate. And if you're self-employed, you can write off those payments or the interest on that loan. So that is an important thing to do. So having a plan to become debt-free is really important. I love programs like Dave Ramsey's or Susie Orman, and I have a bunch of resources available to you if you're interested in those. But I think having a plan is important. I've referred probably hundreds of clients to Consumer Credit Counseling Service. All of these will be available to you at the end of the presentation, all of these resources. But they're debt consolidation helpers, and they don't cost anything. And you can talk with them, and they can help you consolidate your debt, reduce your payments, and have a plan for how to become debt-free. I've had several clients who are Muslim, and they taught me that in Islam, there's the belief that debt is spiritually bad. And I believe that. I think that that's wise. I think when we have crippling debt, it affects us even on a soul level. So empowering yourself to have a healthy relationship with it, take debt when you need to further your education. I'm a big believer in that, in student loans. If you're going to have education, that's money well spent. You will pay it back. Investment in a home or property. But you want to be responsible with it, and you want to pay it off as you can and have a plan and take care of yourself that way. So these are ways to plan for the future and save and invest in yourself, all very important things to do for retirement and having that liquid fund in case something happens so that you have that available to you is very, very important. Insurance. I once had a client that went without health insurance for a week, and she was in her 20s and perfectly healthy, and in that week she had to have emergency gallstone surgery. And it cost her $10,000. So that's a real drag. So insurance is part of financial self-care. You care enough about yourself to make sure that you have health coverage and that you're protecting yourself. Your home, your car, your life insurance is very important, even pet insurance, or other policies that might be available to you. I've worked at places that they have accident insurance or sickness insurance and things like that. So being aware and taking advantage of those resources. Sometimes with our finances, we need the help of an attorney. And personally, I sometimes feel a little frustrated at how much time these things can take. Creating a will, who wants to do that? Probably not many of us look forward to that, but it's important. It's important to have a plan in place so that you can rest in peace, no pun intended, that things are taken care of. So you want to make sure that you are getting some consultation about all these different ways that you can help yourself, including bankruptcy. Sometimes bankruptcy, or whether it's a short sale of your house or whatever it is to get yourself a fresh start, no shame, no stigma, talk to people. There's something interesting about being a therapist. I think all of us, we compare our insides to other people's outsides. So we imagine everybody else is doing really great, and we may suffer in silence. And as a therapist, I've had the deep and profound honor of getting to know so many different clients from all different walks of life, and realizing we all have our issues. We all have our stuff. And most people in our country are dealing with debt. It's a national problem. It's part of our culture. And so don't blame yourself, but it's time to take responsibility and take action and develop a plan to love yourself enough to move through it so you can improve your life. So we talked about the side hustle. I see more and more people improving their income by being creative, by thinking outside of the box. So how can you do that? How can you increase your income in your household? And it might even be your kids. Having your kids pitch in and help out, have them babysit, have them get a job instead of asking you for $20. So then that will help you as well. Negotiation. A couple years ago, I attended a seminar at Kellogg School of Business, and it was for women, and it was given by a sociologist who did the research for Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. Sheryl Sandberg is the Facebook person. And basically, the sociologist said, women do not negotiate. It's just not how we're socialized. So again, when you're in a job, figuring out how can you ask for more. And you might get creative about it. Maybe there's limits in what you can get paid, but maybe you can ask for a different schedule that provides you with more work-life balance. Maybe you can come in earlier and leave earlier. Or maybe you could work 4 long days instead of 5 shorter ones. And that will give you time to pursue some other interest that you have. So thinking about how you can negotiate, and everything is negotiable. So after I attended that seminar, I got pretty aggressive about negotiation. And as a business owner, I had to sign a lot of leases. And I started asking for more things. And one thing that was really kind of silly, but was very easy to have, is in a counseling practice, we needed a lot of filing cabinets for all of our client files. And they're expensive. They're $1,200 for a locked file cabinet. So when I would sign a new lease, I would often ask the property manager, hey, do you have any spare file cabinets from client companies that moved out and just abandoned furniture? They always do. And I never again paid for another filing cabinet. So it may be small things like that, but thinking about where your money is going and getting creative and negotiating. I love getting my hair done, as I mentioned earlier. I spend a lot on blowouts and things for speaking engagements. And I was telling my hairstylist that I was giving this presentation a while back, and he said, man, we could really use that. Or it was my other presentation, how to deal with difficult people. And he said, you should come in and teach our staff. So I went to the owner and I said, I'd love to provide a training for you, maybe in exchange for some blowouts. So I got a year of free blowouts from my salon just by asking. You know, again, it's like what Dr. Phil said, the most you get is what you ask for. I'm a big believer also in documenting everything that you do in your job that's above and beyond so that you're really prepared with a plan when it's time to ask for a raise at your review. And a lot of times employers will say, well, we only give a raise between this percentage and this percentage. And I've often said, well, then I guess I'm asking for a salary adjustment or a title change or whatever it might be so that you're expanding and growing and feeling good about the work that you're doing. You can negotiate leases, whether it's an apartment or a car lease, any major purchases, you want to ask for what you need. Maybe it's certain benefits. It's also important to be aware of how our relationships affect our finances. I said that it's an issue that most couples fight about because usually people have different relationships with money, and so there's disagreements. And it's important to have a system in place if you have a partner that's involved in your financial life so that you're communicating and you're on the same page and that you have regular meetings about your finances. I recommend at least once a month, whether it's even a 20-minute check-in, and then maybe a meeting with a financial planner at least once a year to make sure that you are not just going with the current, but you're mapping out your destiny. And with partners, sometimes we need to set limits. I remember one of my friends said that her husband got mad at her for buying their kids a bunch of stuff from Old Navy, and then he went out and got Bulls tickets. And she was like, So they needed to have some conversations about what their budget is, what their plan is. And sometimes we have to set limits, whether it's with our kids or our partners or extended family members. Something I'm really interested in is financial infidelity. Do you guys know what this is? So I hear about this a lot from people. A lot of my clients who maybe have controlling significant others will go to the grocery store and buy gift cards, Visa cards, so then it logs in as groceries, but they can use those to go buy shoes. So another friend said that his husband comes home with brand new clothes hidden in a dry cleaning bag so that he doesn't look like he's been shopping. So it's when it's some secret spending or just not being honest. I had one client who felt very disempowered and pretty resentful in her marriage, so she had a secret credit card, and she bought herself a bunch of stuff. And then she came to me in therapy because she was in a pickle. She was like, I have this secret credit card. I can't pay it. My husband's going to be so mad. I don't know what to do. And I helped her and supported her in approaching him and telling him. And it uncovered all of these marital issues that they really needed to address. So it was a symptom of a much greater problem in their communication and relationship. But through couples therapy, they moved through it. They paid off that debt and moved forward together in their relationship. So financial infidelity is something important to be aware of. Codependency is an issue for people who are in a relationship with someone who has a problem with drugs or alcohol, or I think really any kind of issue. Maybe it's depression. I know I had a client who had her boyfriend living with her, and he was very, very depressed, and she worked 3 jobs. And he was not getting treatment. He was not doing what he needed to do to be well. And she was enabling him in some ways. You know, it looks like the kind thing to do, but it's actually not great because over time she was exhausted and depleted and resentful, and he didn't feel good about himself. And so sometimes we need mental health counseling or relationship counseling or family counseling to address these issues that may be affecting our bottom line. I love making a vision board. I have a friend who runs a group. She's a life coach, and every January she does a workshop where we make a vision board. How many of you have ever made one? They're cool. And you can make a physical vision board or you can do it digitally. Oprah had something on Pinterest about making a virtual vision board, if that's something you'd like to Google and learn more about. I do it with just taking a poster board and a bunch of magazines and cutting out images of things that I want to welcome into my life. And I usually put on some good music. It usually takes about an hour and a half. The last couple of years, my husband and I have done it with our blended family of 4 kids. And it's really interesting because sometimes you learn something about it, what it is that you want. And then you're welcoming that into your life. And then, so I take a picture of my vision board and I have it as my desktop on my computer. And I also hang it in my home office. And as I move throughout my work life and my personal life, I make sure how I'm spending my time is aligned with what I really want. So I encourage you to do that if you haven't. Being part of a professional association is another part of accessing support. Utilizing mentoring is helpful. And I think having some kind of 1, 3, and 5-year career or financial plan with some goals and smaller objectives can be helpful. And having some kind of accountability partner. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a coach or a counselor or some other mentor, but something that's going to help you move forward. And again, I really believe in creating work-life balance. I once saw a career counselor, and I told her that I wanted to start Urban Balance, but I also wanted to have children. And she said, Joyce, you always have to plan your career in the context of your life and not the other way around. And I think a lot of times we, as women, we put everyone else first and we become kind of sacrificial. I did that. I was taking care of my kids, my clients, my staff. I became exhausted. I see pictures of myself from 8 years ago. I look 10 years older than I do now. I was not in a good place. So we have to care enough about ourselves to take care of ourselves and our dreams, to tend to our dreams so that we can move forward in the way that we want. In my own life, these people have been instrumental in helping me move forward. So having a financial planner. My friend Bill is a financial planner because when he was young, his mother sadly died of cancer. And the family spent so much money on her treatment that they lost their home. And Bill didn't want other people to go through that. So he is really passionate about working with couples in their 20s or 30s and helping them plan their financial future so that they're protected and they're conscious and they're covered. So having those people can be really helpful. My accountant, I mentioned, he's the one who did the business valuation. Having those people in your corner, sometimes it's an investment in money to pay them, but you save money in the long run because they help you have more in the end. Again, counselors or therapists, there are a lot of 12-step groups. Most of you are probably familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous, which is probably the most well-known 12-step group. I work with a lot of people who are in recovery. I personally think we could all benefit from a 12-step program. They basically just encourage you to take responsibility for yourself and access support and coach yourself through positive thinking. And there are 12-step programs that are related to finances. I have a few of them listed here, and I have clients and friends and family members that I've known attend these types of meetings and find them very, very helpful. So your little handout is something that you will take with you, and I encourage you to do this today or this weekend. And this is something that I've developed for my book. So this is a financial self-care wheel. So each spoke is a different part of financial self-care that we've talked about today. And in the center, it says poor, and on the outside, it says prosperous. So let's say you start with managing and paying off debt. Let's say you're not doing super great with that. You might select fair. And you would move throughout the circle and fill that out. And this is what a completed wheel might look like. So you kind of go around, you put your little tick marks on each line, and then you connect it. So the goal is to have a full, round, big, balanced wheel. But we all probably have some dents in our wheel, and this exercise gives you a visual for how you're doing with your financial self-care. You might even use it with some of your friends or family members and help them work through their stuff too. But it's a good assessment. I also have a professional satisfaction wheel, and this is all on your slides, which I'll have available to you in a moment. But our professions, our jobs are meant to support us. And sometimes we need to assess that. How's that going? How good am I feeling about my job right now? This is a tool you can do. You can see how you're doing in these different areas. Is your work providing meaning to you? Do you have work-life balance? Are you receiving recognition? Are you being paid in the way that you feel that you deserve? Do you have the benefits that you need? And if not, you can develop a plan for how to move through that. I've mentioned several different books and websites and different resources. Another one, I mentioned that Louise Hay, Receiving Prosperity. Another great book is, You Are a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero. I listened to that as an audiobook. It's great. I highly recommend that. If you text Joyce to 345-345, you will join my email list, and you will also receive the handouts and the slides and lists of books and resources, and anything else from my website is available to you. So I encourage you to please do that. And I'm happy to be a support and a resource to you in any way that I can, whether it's as a speaker or a counselor or a business professional. Please reach out to me. My information is on the slides, and I would love to be of service to you in helping you receive prosperity. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.